Hello students, welcome to EPG Parshala. I am Satwanti Kapoor from Department of Anthropology, University of Delhi. Today I am going to speak on the module Nature and Culture, Cognitive Approach. The learning objectives of this module are: it will help to understand the concept of cognitive anthropology. It will throw light on the relationship of nature and culture. This module will also look at the different cultural patterns that have been influenced by nature. First of all, let us briefly discuss the introduction part of the module. Introduction. Nature provides for every man's need, not for every man's greed. It is a popular quote used by Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our great nation. Humans are dependent on nature for their survival, as everything from food to the basic survival needs are all provided by nature. Human culture itself is also the product of culture. Nature and culture go hand in hand. The anthropological theory of environmental determinism supports strongly that our culture is determined by the environment. Environmental determinism. The physical environment, especially the climate and terrain, was the active force in shaping cultures, emphasizing that humans were essentially a passive product of the physical surroundings. Hardstay, 1977. Environmental possibilism. Environment does not directly cause specific cultural development, but the presence or absence of specific cultural developments and the presence or absence of specific environmental factors limits the development either by permitting or forbidding their occurrence. Hardstay, 1977. The figure 1 here shows the relationship between nature and culture. Now, the theory of cognitivism rose as a response to behaviorism in the 1950s. Generally, behaviorists only acknowledge the existence of thinking, but cognitivism identified thinking as a behavior. Cognitivism argued that the way people think impart their behavior. In particular, cognitivism studies the relation between human society and human thoughts. From thoughts to society, cognitive theory is an approach to psychology that attempts to explain human behavior by understanding the thought processes. The assumption is that in humans, thought is the primary determinant of emotions and behavior. Information processing is a commonly used description of the mental process, comparing the human mind to a computer. Pure cognitive theory largely rejects behaviorism on the basis that behaviorism reduces complex human behavior to simple cause and effect. Now, significant advances have been made in a relatively short period of time in understanding the human mind and in understanding people's world view through cognitive anthropology. It is an exciting and fascinating field that offers both theoretical and methodological insight to nearly every anthropologist. Cognitive anthropology has something to offer in each of anthropology's 4 fields: archaeology, biological anthropology, linguistics, and cultural anthropology. Moreover, it has significantly changed the face of cultural anthropology, particularly with respect to its methodological development. Cognitive methods are used in a variety of anthropological contexts and applied to a variety of subjects. While cognitive anthropology has relied on a strong tradition of linguistic and cultural approaches, perhaps its greatest challenge lay in demonstrating its applicability to the biological and archaeological subfields. In short, cognitive anthropology holds much promise for the future of cultural analysis. Now, cognitive anthropology, according to D. Andrade, cognitive anthropology is the study of relation between human society and human thoughts. A cognitive anthropologist wants to comprehend how people from various societies make use of their knowledge in their everyday life, in what way they organize this knowledge, how they pass it on and maintain it, and how they conventionalize this knowledge as it is becoming a part of a cultural tradition. Culture is the key term of cognitive anthropology. Cognitive anthropologists share a common basic presumption that culture is pre existent, more in people's mind than objectively in itself. To clarify this, in the field of cognitive anthropology, culture is defined as a kind of knowledge or a system of ideas. The studies of cognitive anthropology have a considerably intensive scope. Their common interest is in complex cognitive systems, wide range of cognitive processes, where sensory perception and description is at one end of the continuum, and the other one is the conceptualization and interpretation of phenomena in a natural and socio-cultural reality. Cognitive anthropology investigates cultural knowledge, knowledge which is embedded in words, stories, and artifacts, and which is learned from and shared with other humans. It is distinguished mostly by its methodology, which originated in attempts to fit formal linguistic methods into linguistic and social anthropology. Cognitive anthropology generally focuses on intellectual and rational aspect of culture, particularly through studies of language use. The centrality of language to cognitive anthropology is related to the origins of the subfield. This methodology also assumes that semantic categories marked by linguistic forms are related to meaningful cultural categories. Now, cognitive anthropological methods for revealing meaningful cultural categories in language have also been expanded in more general ethnographic methods, and more recent work has focused on emotions and culture. Cognitive anthropology is a recent subfield, but interest in mind, culture, and society are well established across the social science. Its interests are in the relationship between mind and experience. Both anthropology and psychology believe that mental capacities are indefinitely malleable and receptive, and that the content and structure of knowledge is created by experience and environment. Now, cognitive anthropology is closely aligned with psychology because both explore the nature of cognitive process. De Andrade, 1995. It also adopted theoretical elements and methodological techniques from structuralism and linguistics. Cognitive anthropology is a broad field of inquiry. For example, studies have examined how people arrange colors and plants into categories, as well how people conceptualize disease in terms of symptoms, cause, and appropriate treatment. Knowledge is a part of culture, and our thought process creates knowledge. Knowledge is created through experiences and the environment surrounding it. Knowledge is mostly gained from experience. These experiences slowly build up our knowledge. Now we'll have a talk on nature affecting culture. Nature affecting culture, environment affects human behavior, and this affects the way one thinks. The relationship between culture and nature is reciprocal. Nature affects culture, and in turn, culture affects the nature around us, and it can be said as culture imposes itself on nature. Culture takes the natural urge we share with other animals and teaches us how to express them in particular ways. People have to eat, and culture teaches us what, when, and how. Kotak, 1997. The primary mechanism by which humans adapt to their environment is culture, probably the most potent method of adaptation available to humans. Dobzhansky, 1972. Cultural responses include technology and organizations, such as the structure of economic, political, and social system. Compared to biology, culture is an extremely flexible and rapidly adaptive mechanism because behavioral response to external environmental forces can be acquired, transmitted, and modified within the lifetime of individual. According to Henry, 1995. All people belong to a specific culture, and each culture has a distinct ecological adaptation. Cultures interact with both the natural and cultural environment. A culture must first meet the biological needs of its members. Then the culture needs of its members must be met, accomplished through religion, social regulation, and other mechanisms. The combination of the biological and cultural ecological interplay is complex. Individuals in culture are born into a system operating within a given environment. Dobzhansky, 1972. In traditional societies, the cultural system one is born into tends to be more influenced by the natural environment. In industrialized culture, the environment tends to be much more socio-economic, with class and income, which helps in access to resources, being the major environmental difference between individuals. Dobzhansky, 1972. Thus, in industrialized cultures, selection process operate more on socio-economic factors, influencing the genetic makeup of populations. As the environment, abiotic, biotic, and cultural changes, humans adapt both biologically and culturally. We can take the example of the famous ethnographic film The Nooks of the North by Robert Flaherty. This original ethnographic film showcases the conditions, habitat of the environment. Living in a very cold environment affects their way of thinking, thus producing material culture like warm clothes, sledge, which makes it easier for them to travel in the snow, harpoons and fishing rods, as the areas are not appropriate for vegetation, so they need to hunt seals and fish. Figure 2 here depicts the subsistence culture. The Eskimo cultures are based on environment they live in, that is of extreme cold, which has helped them evolve a culture to adapt to the cold environment. The Inuits of Arctic have realized effective cultural adaptation to cold stress in terms of clothing and in shelter. They wear layered clothing, trapping air between each layer to act as insulator. They wear clothes made of seal skin as to trap body heat, because in cold climate one is threatened by losing heat or hypothermia. They live in tents made of animal skin, and as they travel on their snow sledge drawn by snow dogs. They also construct temporary shelters called igloos, house made of snow blocks, which is excellent for trapping heat inside because of its shape. They use snow as an excellent insulator. Permanent housing uses underground entrance and higher living areas. The figure shows Eskimos building an igloo. The Eskimos have tools like fishing tools, harpoons, spears, etc., specially designed for hunting seals, fishing, and sometimes snow fox and other animals. Since the environment they live in has no vegetation most of the year, they fully depend on animal meat and fish for their survival. Also, the cold climate demands lots of protein which they get through animal food. The next figure shows the fishing technique of the Eskimos. Human populations in dry, hot environment have realized effective cultural adaptations to heat stress using clothing and shelter designed to reduce heat production, reduce heat gain from radiation, conduction and convection, and they have increased evaporation. The typical clothing pattern among the people living in dry and humid environment is light and loose clothing. Shelters are frequently built compact. Light colors are used to reflect the sun rays, and doors and windows are kept closed during the day. Rutherford, 1990. Cognitivism looks into knowledge gathered from words, stories, artifacts. Now, words depict knowledge of any community, that's a language. These are words that the community know of or have knowledge about, but what the community does not know about the word does not exist. Stories are another aspect that can unfold the age-old knowledge of any community. Artifacts clearly shows the culture and knowledge that a community possesses. Tools, ornaments, pots are created according to the cultural needs, depending on the knowledge. These all traits are learned or shared from one another, and also one generation to another, or from one individual to another. The San or Bushmen of the Kalahari desert use a small bow and poisonous arrows for hunting, since they have to hide in the tall dry grass of the semi-desert and camouflage themselves for the hunt. Since a big bow would require a lots of body strength, which would require them to stand, making it inappropriate for hunting. The figure here is presenting a Bushman while hunting. The Bushman culture clearly shows their way of living with their hunting expertise, that there are other cultural traits like they wear minimum clothing as they live in a very hot environment. Their food culture includes gathered underground roots, meat from the hunt, and collected wild fruits, nuts, etc. They live in house made of branches of trees, something like twigs, and roof made of long dried grasses. This is mainly used to reflect the heat. A Sang or Eskimo hut can be seen in figure 5. Now, cognitivism looks into how people of various societies make use of the different knowledge, how they pass on and maintain it, and attempts to explain human behavior by understanding the thought processes. Thoughts are inspired by the nature around an individual or a group, and as thoughts determine human behavior, which in turn determines culture. As already mentioned, the cognitive theory or cognitivism has three main variables: behavioral factors, environmental factors, and personal factors or personal experiences. Now, behavioral factors. Thoughts affects a person's behavior, in turn affecting the way they think. Environmental factors. External factors can alter the way you behave. The type of environment around us can affect the way we act. Now, personal factors or experiences. They built up on that knowledge. Studies on cognitivism or cognitive anthropology can be traced back to Franz Boas. He realized that different people have different conceptions of the world around them. He focused his life's work on understanding the relationship between human mind and the environment. He focused on understanding the psychology of tribal people, investigating tribal language, of sense and perception such as color. Some communities only have the concept of few colors. For example, the Lepchas, a hill tribe native of Sikkim and Darjeeling Hills, know only the color as white, black, blue, green, red, yellow, while the English language have a long list of colors. In the next figure here, color grid showing white, green, yellow, black, red and blue colors. Now, communities all over the world have their own ways of putting plants into categories. They have their own conceptualized diseases in terms of symptoms, cause and treatment. To summarize this summary, cognitive anthropology not only focuses on discovering how different people organize culture, but also how they utilize culture. Contemporary cognitive anthropology attempts to access the organizing principles that underlie and motivate human behavior. Though the scope of cognitive anthropology is expensive, its methodology continues to depend on a long-standing tradition of ethnographic fieldwork and structured interviews. But some of the most severe criticism of cognitive anthropology have come from its own practitioners. According to Kissing, the so-called new ethnography was unable to move beyond the analysis of artificially simplified and often semantic domain. Ethnoscientists tend to study such things as color categories and folk taxonomies without being able to elucidate their relevance to understanding culture as a whole. Taking a lead from generative grammar in linguistics, ethno-scientists sought cultural grammars intending to move beyond the analysis of semantic categories and domains into wider behavioral realm. While cognitive anthropologists of the last 2 decades have attempted to address these problems, there are inherent problems attached to it. One of the most glaring problems is that almost all investigators conduct majority of their research in English. Cognitive anthropology deals with abstract theories regarding the nature of the mind. While there have been plethora of methods for assessing culture contained in the mind, question remains about whether the results in fact reflect how individuals organize and perceive society, or whether they are merely manufactured by investigators having no foundation in their subject reality. Another criticism is that universal agreement on how to find culture in the mind has yet to emerge. When one compares the work of major figures in the field such as De Andrade, Kronfeld and Shore, it is clear they each have a different idea about just how to pursue the goal of the field. While some may contend that this is a deficiency, it attests to the field's vitality and the centrality of the issue under contention. Moreover, when approaching an issue as complex as the human mind, mental processes and culture, it is salutary to seek a multifaceted convergence. As all environments are dynamic, a culture must make constant adjustment just to maintain some sort of equilibrium. And there is a constant interplay between cultural practices and biological adaptation using their cognitive thinking. The classical example of this are igloos, the snow huts or snow houses which Eskimos make, Inuits make, which are made of snow, and with their typical dome-shaped structure and a long entrance, they are able to keep it warm using a seal's lamp. The clothing they wear is layered, and each layer traps air which becomes warm, and it acts as an insulator. Whatever is available there, no vegetation, they survive on high protein diet, but that high protein diet is a prerequisite for adaptation to extremes of cold, as the body demands or more heat production and less heat dissipation. So in cold climate they need to have high protein diet to combat or to equalize the high metabolism rate. On the other hand, in hot environment like Kalahari desert, people wear very loose fitting light clothes, because the problem in desert area where the temperature is as high as 50 degrees Celsius, the problem is to produce less heat and to dissipate more heat in order to make thermal equilibrium in the body. Similarly, their diets are arranged accordingly. Their diet pattern is shaped by whatever is available in the environment. So these are the classical examples which reflects light on our culture, our cognitive behavior, our adaptability to it. Thank you.